The Marine had seen danger in many forms, but nothing struck him harder than the sight of a little girl standing alone at the edge of the sidewalk. She wore a torn pink dress, ripped in several places, her thin arms wrapped around herself against the cold. At her feet lay a battered German shepherd, chained to a street lamp with a cardboard sign that read, $1 for injured dog. Her voice trembled as he approached. "Sir, please, someone told me to sell him. If no one buys him, they'll come back." The Marine's heartbeat turned heavy. He expected a sick stray, maybe a lost pet, but when the dog slowly lifted his head, something in its eyes froze him to the bone. "Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and if this story touches your heart, make sure to subscribe for more tales of courage, compassion, and miracles that still happen in this world." A cold winter afternoon wind swept through the narrow streets of the small town, carrying dust, dry leaves, and the quiet heaviness of early winter. Staff Sergeant Daniel Reyes, a 36-year-old U.S. Marine Corps infantryman, walked down the sidewalk with a slow, weighted stride. He had returned only the day before from a long overseas deployment, and though his uniform was now replaced with simple civilian winter clothes, his bearing still carried that unmistakable Marine posture, shoulders squared, back straight, eyes always scanning. Daniel was tall, with a rugged, angular jawline dusted by a few days of unshaven stubble, his skin tanned and scarred from years under desert suns. His short black hair was cut in a tight military fade, and his dark brown eyes held a mixture of vigilance and exhaustion, eyes of a man who had seen too much and slept too little. He had planned only to buy a hot coffee and return to the quiet motel he was staying at, yet something tugged at his attention, something small, trembling, huddled against a flickering lamppost. At first he thought it was just a stray dog and someone crouching beside it, but as he stepped closer, he saw the cardboard sign, $1 for injured dog. The writing was crooked, almost desperate. The cardboard was bent at the corners, damp from the cold air. Standing beside it was a girl, no older than 8 or 9, skinny, her clothes ragged and too thin for the weather. Her small frame shivered under a threadbare gray hoodie 2 sizes too big. Her hair was a tangled mess of light brown curls, falling over a pale face smudged with dust. The girl's eyes were enormous, dark, and filled with a kind of fear no child should ever know. Those eyes flinched at every passing footstep, every engine rumble, every shadow. Daniel slowed his steps, instincts rising. This wasn't just a girl trying to sell a random dog. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. Then he saw the dog lying beside her, a German shepherd, large, maybe 5 or 6 years old. Its fur once thick but now patchy and dull, revealing raw skin beneath. Its shoulders were gaunt, ribcage visible beneath the matted coat. A hind leg was swollen and twisted unnaturally, and the collar around its neck was a makeshift chain digging painfully into the skin. The animal's breathing was shallow. Its eyes, warm brown but clouded with trauma, blinked slowly, as if caught between pain and surrender. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. He had worked with military dogs before. He knew that look. That was not the look of a stray. That was the look of a working dog who had been broken. The little girl hugged her arms around herself as Daniel approached, stepping slightly in front of the dog as if her tiny frame could shield him from harm. Her voice shook when she spoke. "Sir, please, $1. That's all they said I have to ask for." Daniel crouched to her level, keeping his voice soft but steady, a voice he used with frightened civilians overseas with children who had lost too much too early. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, eyes darting over Daniel's shoulder toward the edge of the sidewalk. "My name is Lily," she whispered. Her voice cracked halfway through. I'm supposed to sell him. They said I have to stay here until someone buys him." Daniel frowned. "Who told you to do that, Lily?" She didn't answer. Her gaze flicked again toward the corner of the street. Daniel turned slightly, not enough to startle her, but enough to see what she was looking at. A man leaned against a graffiti-covered brick wall, pretending to smoke. But Daniel instantly recognized the stance of someone not trying to relax, but trying to observe. The man was in his late 30s, tall, heavily tattooed, with a shaved head and a thick leather jacket. His posture screamed aggression. His eyes, cold, calculating, were locked on Lily and the dog. The man's jaw clenched when he noticed Daniel looking back. Daniel slowly turned back to Lily. His voice remained calm, but his tone sharpened just slightly. "Lily, are you here because you want to be?" Her lower lip trembled. She shook her head. "No. They told me if I don't sell him, they'll take him away, and they'll hurt him again." Her breath hitched. "They said I'm nobody, so the police won't listen to me." Daniel felt his pulse throb. He knew the type. Some men were dangerous when armed, others were dangerous simply because they enjoyed hurting the powerless. "That man back there," Daniel asked softly, "is he watching you?" Lily didn't speak. She just lowered her eyes. Silent answers were often the loudest. Daniel shifted his attention to the dog. He gently reached out a hand, stopping just before touching the animal. The German shepherd's ears twitched. He lifted his head just slightly, eyes focusing on Daniel with a faint spark of recognition. Not familiarity, no, this dog didn't know him, but he recognized Daniel's energy, the energy of a soldier. Daniel examined the collar. Beneath the rusted metal, he spotted something faint, numbers scratched off, but not entirely erased. His stomach dropped. This was not some random dog. This dog had once belonged to someone official, someone who had wanted to erase his identity. "Lily," he murmured. "Where did they find him?" "I don't know." Tears welled in her eyes. "They told me not to ask. They only said someone needed him gone." Daniel felt cold. Gone, erased, disposed of. This wasn't a sale. This was a cover-up. His jaw tightened. "Why $1?" he asked. Lily sniffled, looking ashamed as if the price was her fault. "They said $1 makes it a real sale. Then nobody can blame them anymore. If someone buys him, it's not their problem." Daniel exhaled slowly through his nose. He had heard of tactics like this overseas, criminals using the poor to hide dirty work. He never thought he'd see it in his own country. "Lily," he said gently, "who are these people?" Before she could answer, the tattooed man shifted off the wall, taking 2 slow steps forward. His stare hardened into a threat. The air itself seemed to thicken. Daniel's military instincts roared awake. The little girl noticed the movement and whispered urgently, "Please, please don't look at him again. If he thinks you want the dog, he'll get angry." Daniel studied her trembling hands, her quivering shoulders, the bruises on her wrists partly hidden under the frayed hoodie sleeves. She wasn't just scared for the dog. She was scared for herself. He lowered his voice even further. "Lily, do you want me to help you?" She hesitated, then nodded once, so small a gesture that only someone watching with absolute attention would notice. Daniel rose to his feet. The tattooed man's eyes followed him like a predator watching prey. Daniel reached into his wallet and pulled out a $1 bill. "I'll take him," he said quietly. Lily's eyes widened, not with joy, but with relief so raw it nearly broke Daniel's heart. She handed him the chain with both hands, as if passing him something sacred. As Daniel touched the chain, the German shepherd forced himself upright with a weak whine. His injured legs shook, but he pressed his head against Daniel's knee, as though begging for protection. Daniel felt something deep inside him settle, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. He looked again at the scratched numbers on the collar. He knew that format. He had seen it before on deployed military working dogs. He had trained with dogs who carried similar IDs. He had lost one during a chaotic mission 3 years ago when a corrupt supply officer had interfered with a raid. A thought struck him like lightning. No, it couldn't be. Not here. Not like this. But as he knelt again to get a closer look, the German shepherd lifted his tired eyes to meet Daniel's, and in those worn, fading eyes, Daniel saw a familiarity that sent a tremor up his spine. The tattooed man suddenly stepped off the curb. Daniel heard the heavy crunch of his boots against the asphalt. The air thickened. Danger pulsed. The girl gasped. Daniel rose slowly, keeping the dog behind him, every muscle coiled, every instinct sharpening like a blade. The man stopped 3 steps away. His lips curled. "You shouldn't have bought that dog, soldier." Daniel's pulse hammered, because in that moment, in that low, threatening voice, he realized something. The dog wasn't the only one being hunted, and whatever truth this dog carried, someone was willing to kill to silence it. A cold wind scraped along the narrow street, carrying with it the faint smell of rusted metal and damp cardboard. The Marine, still standing between the little girl and the trembling German shepherd, felt the shift in the air the moment her small shoulders collapsed. The girl's thin frame shook violently, her tangled hair clinging to her tear-streaked cheeks as if even the winter breeze pitied her. She pressed her hands to her face, and the cry that slipped out was so raw, so desperate, it split the stillness in half. The Marine lowered himself to one knee, his boots crunching against broken pavement. He kept his voice low, steady, the calm tone of a man who had led soldiers through darker nights than this. "Take your time," he murmured. "Tell me what happened." The girl swallowed hard and finally looked up. Her eyes were wide, the kind of wide that never belonged to a child, and inside them was a mixture of hunger, fear, and a kind of silent apology, as though existing itself had become a burden. She clutched the frayed edge of her sleeve as if it could shield her from the truth she was about to tell. "They said, if nobody bought him—" Her breath hitched painfully. "They said they'd take him away somewhere else, somewhere I'd never see him again, and that he wouldn't survive there." Her voice broke completely. The Marine's jaw clenched, not because of anger, though that simmered beneath the surface, but because of the sheer injustice of seeing a child forced into fear that wasn't hers to carry. He studied her closely now, letting himself truly see her. She was no more than 8 or 9. Her skin was pale beneath smudges of dirt. Her hair, once perhaps a soft brown, had turned dull and uneven, chopped roughly as if someone had taken scissors to it in frustration. Her oversized coat sagged on her like a blanket, its buttons mismatched, its pockets torn. A child who had been invisible for too long. The Marine exhaled slowly. "Who forced you?" he asked quietly. Before she could answer, the dog beside her whimpered, a low, trembling sound that made her immediately reach out and stroke the top of his head with her shivering fingers. The Marine watched her movements. They weren't careless. They weren't frightened. They were protective, instinctive, like she had taken on the responsibility of shielding the dog from a world too cruel to care. He shifted his attention to the German shepherd. This close, the damage became clearer. The dog's coat, once thick, was patchy and uneven, revealing bruised skin underneath. He had a mature build, likely around 5 to 6 years old, but carried himself like an elderly animal, each breath shallow, each blink slow. His ears twitched at sounds others couldn't hear, the instinct of a trained working dog still buried somewhere inside the exhaustion. The Marine reached toward the dog, careful not to move too fast. The shepherd trembled, but didn't recoil. Instead, he lifted his head just enough for the Marine to see the faint imprint around his neck. A ring of irritation, flattened fur, reddened skin, and the unmistakable pattern left behind by a tight metal restraint. His fingers brushed something else, a ridge beneath the fur, a tiny indentation, a scar, not from an accident, not from play, but from equipment. Recognition shot through the Marine's chest like a jolt. This dog wasn't just trained. He had been conditioned, drilled, molded for discipline. The way he braced his paws, even while weak, told the Marine everything he needed to know. This dog had once followed orders without hesitation. And then he saw it. On the inner side of the dog's collar, where the leather had cracked, where the cheap paint had flaked away, there was the faintest shadow of something carved into the material. A number. Not readable anymore, but recognizable in structure. A former identification code, filed down, scraped roughly, hidden by someone who didn't want this dog traced back to anything official. The Marine felt the muscles in his neck tighten. Someone had gone through the trouble of erasing this dog's past, and someone was still watching. He eyed the corner of the street, the shadow where the tattooed man had been moments before. Now empty. The Marine scanned the rooftops, the alley, the parked vehicles. Whoever stood there earlier had vanished without a trace. A hunter doesn't linger when prey slips into another's protection. The girl tugged on the Marine's sleeve. Her voice was small, trembling. "I don't want him to die. They said he was worthless now, that nobody would care." His chest tightened. Worthless. That word wasn't for dogs, it was for tools that had outlived their usefulness. That alone told him more than anything else. He looked at the girl. "Where are your parents?" Her expression changed instantly. Not surprise, not pain, but the emptiness of someone who had been asked that question too many times and no longer knew how to answer. She stared at the ground. I don't have any. Her stomach growled softly, betraying how long she had gone without food. She wrapped her arms around herself as if trying to hide the sound. The Marine inhaled sharply. In his years of deployment, he had seen children in war zones with that same expression. Those who learned too early that the world did not bend to protect the small. Those who learned silence to survive. He spoke gently. How long have you been on your own? She shrugged, hugging her knees. A while. Who told you to sell the dog? This time she hesitated. Not out of fear of him, but out of fear of the memory. There were 3 men, she whispered. They found him in a warehouse. They got angry when they saw his collar. One of them said he belonged to the wrong people. They started hitting him, and then they made me take him. Her voice faltered. Tears welled again. They gave me the sign and said if someone buys him, even for $1, then he's not their problem anymore. They said if I didn't do it right, they'd make him disappear before sunset. The Marine felt his pulse thrum in his ears, using a child as a shield to bypass legal accountability, using her innocence to disguise their cruelty, and using the price of $1 to simulate a transaction that freed them from any blame. It wasn't just wrong. It was intentional. He looked down at the dog again. The shepherd lifted his gaze, just barely. And for a moment, in those tired eyes, there was something familiar, a piece of memory, a fragment of something that tugged at the Marine's conscience. But he pushed the thought aside. Not yet, not until he confirmed what his instincts were screaming. The girl brushed the dog's cheek with quiet tenderness. He didn't bark or bite them, even when they hurt him. He just kept looking at them like he was remembering something. The Marine's breath caught. Remembering. Yes. That word mattered. He leaned closer, checking the dog's front legs. There were faint scars along the forearms, thin, straight, evenly spaced. Not from being hit, not from accident. Scars formed from tight restraints used in advanced training routines. He had seen similar markings before, on dogs used for specialized operations. Working dogs who went through missions ordinary handlers could never imagine. Dogs who had saved lives. Dogs who had been trusted more than men. The Marine's throat tightened. He forced himself to stay calm. What else did the men say? The girl wiped her face with the back of her hand. They said someone important didn't want this dog around anymore. That he smelled something he wasn't supposed to. They were scared. Like really scared. Like they were doing someone else's orders. That confirmed it. The Marine felt his heartbeat drag heavily inside his chest. Pieces of memory, the warehouse, the reports filed months ago, the mission that had gone wrong, the dog that never returned, started clicking together like gears turning too late. He stared at the German shepherd. This dog? No, he couldn't jump to conclusions yet. But every instinct he had honed on the battlefield whispered the same thing. This dog was not abandoned. He was silenced. The shepherd suddenly coughed weakly and slumped sideways, his paws sliding against the pavement. His breath turned shallow, his eyelids fluttering. The girl cried out, "Please, help him! Help him, please!" The Marine caught the dog before he hit the ground, his strong arms steadying the limp weight. He felt how fragile the animal had become, how dangerously close he was to collapse. He needed treatment, he needed warmth, he needed safety. The Marine stood, lifting the dog gently but firmly. "We're going," he said. "Now!" The girl looked up at him, terrified. "They'll come for us if we move. They always come." The Marine met her frightened gaze with the unwavering steadiness of a man who had faced bullets, fire, and death. "Let them," he said quietly, and behind them, from the dark end of the street, a shadow shifted, watching, waiting, hunting. The cold street vibrated under the trembling light of a flickering neon sign as the Marine shifted the weight of the injured German shepherd in his arms, preparing to guide the homeless girl away from the corner where everything had begun to unravel. He took 2 steps. Then a harsh screech sliced through the street like metal against bone. A black pickup truck lurched around the corner, tires spitting slush and dust as it slid to a stop inches from the curb. Its headlights glared like the eyes of something feral and hungry. The Marine instinctively pulled the girl behind him, his body tightening, shoulders rising with the old instinct he thought he had left on the battlefield. 3 men jumped out. The first, clearly the leader, was a thick-set man in his early 40s with a square jaw and a cruelly shaved head that glistened under the streetlight. His weathered skin carried the leathery texture of someone who had lived too many years under bad choices and cheap alcohol. A jagged scar cut diagonally from the corner of his right eye down toward his cheek, the kind acquired in a fight that was never fully won. His name, though the Marine didn't know it yet, was Gunner Tate, a low-level enforcer with a talent for violence and a reputation for enjoying it a little too much. Behind him were 2 younger men, both mid-20s, both dressed in dark hoodies and cheap work boots. One was tall and bony, with a thin rat-like face and jittery hands that kept tapping against his thigh. This was Eli Marsh, a man whose anxiety made him unpredictable. The other was shorter but solidly built, a dark beard trimmed tight along a broad jaw and a tattoo of a snake coiling down his neck. This was Rico Hale, silent but dangerous, with eyes that never stopped calculating. Gunner's voice ripped through the street. "Don't get involved in things that ain't yours, Marine. Hand the dog over." He didn't say buy it back. He didn't ask for a price. He said hand it over, a command, not a negotiation. The Marine's grip tightened around the limp shepherd, whose breathing had become shallow and uneven. The dog's head rested weakly against his chest, and the girl, small, shivering, terrified, clung to the Marine's sleeve. He forced calm into his voice. "This dog is injured. He needs a vet." Gunner took one slow, heavy step forward, his boots crunching the thin crust of ice beneath them. "He needs to disappear," Gunner growled. "That dog has seen things he wasn't supposed to. Now move." Behind him, Eli swallowed hard, tapping his fingers faster, and Rico rolled his shoulders like a boxer preparing for a bout. The air thickened with the scent of danger. The girl tugged at the Marine's sleeve, her voice trembling like a dying candle flame. "Please don't let them take him," she whispered. "They'll kill him. They promised they would." The Marine lowered the dog gently to the ground, positioning the girl behind him. His breathing slowed, purpose sharpening in his eyes. He wasn't a man who looked for trouble, but he had never backed down from a fight that needed fighting. "Not today," he said quietly. Gunner's lip curled. "Have it your way." He lunged. The Marine pivoted, ducking easily under Gunner's arm, driving his elbow into the man's ribs with practiced precision. The impact made Gunner grunt, but he recovered quickly. He was stronger than he looked. Eli rushed forward next, swinging clumsily. The Marine sidestepped, grabbed Eli's wrist, twisted, and slammed him against the truck's door, knocking the wind out of him. Rico came in silently from behind. The Marine sensed the movement, spun and blocked just in time, catching Rico's arm before it could wrap around his throat. Rico fought like someone who'd grown up learning survival with his fists. He drove a knee at the Marine's side, grazing ribs, but the Marine countered with a sharp strike to the shoulder that made Rico stumble back. The girl screamed when she saw Shadow collapse fully, his body twitching as though he were slipping into shock. The Marine broke free from Rico and rushed to the dog's side. Shadow's pupils had narrowed, his breath shallow and uneven. His legs twitched violently as if reliving a nightmare he couldn't escape. The girl fell to her knees beside him, tears streaking down her face. "He's dying," she cried. Something inside the Marine snapped, the same fierceness he once felt carrying wounded brothers through explosions and gunfire. The instinct to protect surged back like a rising tide. He scooped Shadow into his arms again, but Gunner wasn't finished. "Don't you walk away from me!" the scarred man roared, charging once more. The Marine had no time for finesse. He lowered his shoulder and drove it straight into Gunner's chest. The impact knocked both men off balance. They hit the pavement hard, rolling through dirty slush. Gunner tried to swing, but the Marine pinned his arm and delivered a sharp blow to the jaw, hard enough to stun, not kill. Gunner's head hit the pavement, dazed. Behind them, Eli scrambled into the truck, screaming, We gotta go now!" Rico cursed under his breath, backing away from the Marine with fear finally creeping into his eyes. They hauled Gunner up, staggering as they dragged him into the truck bed. Before slamming the door shut, Gunner pointed a shaking finger at the Marine. "That dog knows too much, and so do you now. This ain't over." The engine roared, tires screeched, the truck tore down the street and vanished around the corner, leaving only a cloud of exhaust and the echo of a threat that felt too real. The Marine lifted Shadow again, his arms trembling under the dog's fading weight. The girl wiped her tears, voice cracking. "Sir, please, help him. Take him somewhere safe. Don't let them take him back." He looked at her, really. Looked at her. The dirt on her small cheeks, the raw fear in her eyes, the bruises on her wrist she kept hiding under her sleeve. This wasn't just a child caught in a bad moment. This was a child caught in a nightmare she had been forced to survive for far too long. He tightened his jaw. "Stay close," he said. "We're getting both of you out of here." He scanned the street, broken ice, flickering lights, shadows stretching long across the pavement. And in those shadows he could swear he saw movement, not clear, not certain, but enough to chill the back of his neck. Someone else was watching, someone who hadn't made a move yet, someone who didn't need to, because now the Marine and the dog were finally on their radar. He lifted Shadow and took the first step toward the edge of the street. Far behind him, unnoticed, a cell phone camera flicked off. Someone had been recording the entire fight, someone who sent the video to a number saved only as boss, and a message followed. "He's found the dog." The Marine never saw the reply, but the man reading it smiled, because Shadow wasn't the only one carrying a dangerous secret, and the Marine had just reopened a war he didn't know he was part of. A thin, icy wind pressed against the windows of the small veterinary clinic, its cold breath rattling the glass as if the night itself wanted to come inside. The lights above flickered slightly, bathing the room in an uneven glow as the Marine, his uniform still carrying the dust of the street confrontation, stood beside the examination table where the injured German shepherd lay. The clinic smelled faintly of antiseptic and old wood, a strangely quiet place after the chaos of the street. Shadow's breathing was shallow, but at least it was steady, though the Marine could feel his own pulse hammering as he tried to understand what had happened to the dog that once meant everything to him. Across from him stood Dr. Helen Ward, a woman in her early 50s with silver-streaked auburn hair tied into a low bun. Her frame was slim but steady, and her movements carried the calm precision of someone who had spent decades dealing with frightened animals and panicked owners. Her pale blue eyes held a firmness that only came from experience, yet they were softened by the compassion of someone who had devoted her life to healing creatures who could not speak for themselves. As she examined Shadow's wounds, her brows tightened, forming thin lines of worry on her forehead. "Whoever did this," she murmured, her voice low and controlled, "didn't just mistreat him. They meant to break him." The Marine swallowed hard. His name was Logan Wyatt, a 36-year-old U.S. Marine with a broad, angular face shaped by years of deployment. His skin was sun-worn, olive-toned, with a faint scar cutting down from his right eyebrow, an old injury from a rooftop skirmish overseas. He wore a neatly trimmed black beard that outlined his jaw, and his dark eyes often carried the quiet watchfulness of someone who had seen too many things others didn't survive. But now, those eyes trembled at the sight of Shadow's weakened form. Shadow had once been a powerful, disciplined 4-year-old German shepherd, thick black and tan coat, strong chest, sharp ears that always stood alert. He had moved like a storm, quick, precise, confident. But now the dog's coat was dull and patchy, his ribs visible under the skin, his movements stiff with pain. The Marine's throat tightened. Nothing could have prepared him for seeing his former partner like this. Dr. Ward continued her examination, brushing her gloved fingers over an area near Shadow's shoulder where a cluster of faint scars crossed like pale lightning marks. "These didn't happen recently," she whispered. "They're older, months old, like something he survived before." Logan leaned slightly closer, his eyes narrowing at those scars. He remembered them. Shadow had gotten those during a winter mission overseas when a collapsing beam had scraped across the dog's shoulder as they cleared out a half-destroyed compound. Shadow had saved Logan's life during that mission by dragging him away from Ma, falling debris a split second before it crushed them both. There was no mistake. These scars were from that night. "He really is Shadow," Logan whispered, voice cracking. Dr. Ward glanced at him, the corners of her lips tightening in sympathy. "You knew him?" Logan nodded slowly. "He was my partner, my friend, and I thought he was dead." Before Dr. Ward could respond, she gently turned Shadow's neck, inspecting the collar that was still loosely hanging from it. "This is wrong," she muttered, pointing to the inside of the collar. "Someone scraped off the ID. But look here. She angled it so Logan could see. Beneath the rough scratches and gouges, faint numbers hid like ghosts in metal. This was done in a hurry and not by someone trained. Logan felt anger boil beneath his ribs. They tried to erase who he was. Dr. Ward nodded, her expression darkening. Yes, someone wanted him untraceable, disposable. Shadow whimpered softly, and Logan instinctively reached out, placing a steady hand on the dog's side. Easy, boy. I'm here. I'm not leaving. As he stroked Shadow's warm fur, he couldn't stop the flood of memories returning. Nights patrolling together, missions where they trusted each other more than anyone else, the bond that had felt unbreakable. And then the day Shadow disappeared from the base without warning. Officials claimed it had been a transport mistake, that the dog had gone missing during a routine relocation. Logan had never believed them. The story had holes, the reports were sloppy, and every time he tried to push further, higher-ranking officers told him to let it go. He never did, but he had run out of leads until tonight. Logan took a breath, steadying himself, then pulled out his phone. He opened an encrypted file, a mission report from the year Shadow vanished. One field in the document glowed faintly. Shadow detected sub-level storage containing unregistered packages. Investigation pending. Under that, in red, case reassigned, clearance restricted. Dr. Ward watched him closely, sensing the shift in his demeanor. What did you find? Logan's voice was low. He uncovered something he wasn't supposed to. Something powerful people didn't want found. The clinic door creaked, and Officer Brent Marlowe, the local on-duty patrolman, stepped inside. Brent was a tall, sandy-haired man in his late 20s with a strong build and kind hazel eyes. His uniform was clean but slightly wrinkled. He always worked long hours, often volunteering for extra shifts because he hated letting people down. He was well liked in the small town, though some whispered he was too soft-hearted for police work. Brent nodded respectfully toward Logan and Dr. Ward. I talked to dispatch. They're sending someone to retrieve evidence from the scene. But, his voice lowered, his eyes shifting uncertainly. We've had reports about a Kupamotan black pickup being connected to suspicious activity. You may have stumbled into something bigger. Logan's eyes hardened. I already know I did. Brent hesitated, then continued. We also got calls from people saying they saw a group of men leaving the area fast. One woman thought one of them was carrying a weapon. Logan clenched his jaw. It only confirmed what he already suspected. Before he could reply, Shadow suddenly lifted his head, ears twitching sharply. The dog's muscles tensed, and he let out a weak, low growl, one so faint it was barely audible, but Logan recognized it immediately. Shadow sensed danger. Even in his broken state, that instinct had not died. Dr. Ward stiffened. What's wrong? The Marine listened. In the distance, he heard something outside, the crunch of gravel, too slow and deliberate to be casual. Shadows moved near the window, just beyond the curtain's reach. Brent stepped toward the entrance, hand lowering instinctively toward his holster. I'll check. But Logan grabbed his arm firmly. No, they're not here for you. The sound came again, this time closer, heavier. Someone was approaching the side of the building. The fluorescent lights above flickered once, twice, then steadied again. Dr. Ward whispered nervously, Should I lock the back door? Logan shook his head, his voice deep and calm, though inside him a storm raged. No time. Get the girl into the supply room. Stay low. Don't make a sound. Brent swallowed and nodded. What about you? Logan's gaze sharpened like a blade. I'll handle them. Then, without warning, a smash of shattering glass erupted from the front window, fragments exploding across the floor like a rain of ice. Dr. Ward gasped and ducked. Brent drew his weapon. Logan stepped forward, shielding Shadow with his body as the cold wind howled through the broken frame. Heavy boots crunched across broken glass. A dark silhouette stepped into the clinic, then another, then a third. Logan felt his heartbeat slow into a calm, deadly rhythm. They're here, he said quietly. And the room plunged into silence before the storm. The soft glow of emergency lights flickered against the clinic walls as the cold night tightened around the small town. carrying the distant hum of sirens and the sharp scent of shattered glass. The air inside the veterinary clinic trembled with tension. Staff Sergeant Daniel Reyes, still standing in front of the exam room, braced himself as if he were back on a battlefield far from home. His broad shoulders lifted with a slow breath, the weight of war and responsibility settling into every scar on his skin. His dark eyes narrowed, reflecting a soldier's readiness, the instinct that had guided him through years of combat. And now that instinct told him one thing: the real threat had finally arrived. A man stepped through the broken window, tall, heavy-built, dressed in a tactical black coat. His hair, peppered gray and cropped close, framed a face carved by years of cruelty. His cold blue eyes zeroed in on Daniel, then slid toward Lily and the wounded German shepherd lying on the exam table. His boots crunched on the broken glass with a slow, deliberate rhythm. This was no street thug. This was Captain Victor Hale, a once-respected law enforcement commander whose reputation crumbled under whispers of corruption, falsified reports, and ties to underground networks. Thick veins of bitterness ran beneath his aging face. A deep scar traced the side of his jaw, an old gunfight that rumor said he caused by betraying one of his own. Victor Hale was the type of man who climbed the ranks not by loyalty or courage, but by fear, inflicting it, cultivating it, living on it. He pointed a gloved finger at the dog. "Reyes," Hale growled, "step aside. That animal has seen what it shouldn't have seen, and I need it gone." Behind Hale, two more men slipped into the room, broad-shouldered enforcers in leather jackets, both in their 40s, both built like men who solved problems with their fists. Their expressions were cold and empty, reflecting only obedience. Lily gasped and instinctively hid behind Daniel, clutching the hem of his coat. Her small body trembled violently. Daniel shifted, placing himself fully between her and the intruders. "No one's touching her," Daniel said quietly, "and no one's touching the dog." Shadow, weak and bandaged, lifted his head, forcing his tired eyes open as if he too sensed danger. His ears struggled to rise. Victor Hale smirked. "You think you're a hero, Reyes? You think rescuing that mutt will change anything? That dog ruined months of my operation. It smelled what it shouldn't have during that raid. I tried relocating it, but the animal kept slipping through the cracks." Daniel clenched his fists. The truth finally had a face. "You ordered Shadow's disappearance," Daniel said, his voice low. "You tortured a working dog for doing its job." Hale laughed, cold and sharp. "I did what was necessary. That dog jeopardized everything, and then I find out. You, of all people, bought it tonight. Fate's got a sick sense of humor." He walked closer, boots grinding the fragments of glass underfoot. "Step aside, Sergeant. There are things bigger than you at play." Daniel didn't move. Inside him, something anchored in place, something born from years of promising himself he'd never leave the innocent behind again. "Lily," Daniel said softly, not taking his eyes off Hale. "Get behind the counter and stay low." She hesitated, fear choking her breath. Daniel turned just enough for his voice to reach her with the gentle authority of a guardian. "You're safe now. I won't let anyone touch you." She obeyed, crawling behind the metal counter. Hale gestured at his men. "Bring me the dog." The two enforcers moved forward, but the moment they stepped near, Daniel exploded into motion. He blocked the first attacker's swing, slammed his elbow into the man's throat, then pivoted, sweeping the second man's legs from under him. The fight turned messy, raw force against tactical precision. Daniel's training shone through every movement, but he was outnumbered. A fist struck his ribs, another hit his jaw. Pain flashed white across his vision. Still, he stayed between them and Shadow. Shadow tried to rise, growling through his pain, loyal even in weakness. Daniel seized a metal tray and blocked a strike, sending it clattering across the floor. He grabbed one attacker by the collar and shoved him into the exam counter. Equipment crashed down, glass shattered. Victor Hale stepped back, annoyed, watching his men fail. Daniel's breath came in sharp bursts, sweat mixing with blood on his brow. His body screamed from the hits, but his resolve only hardened. "You're done, Hale," Daniel spat. "I called internal affairs before I got here. They know everything. They're on the way." Hale froze. "You're lying," he hissed. Daniel shook his head. "Look outside." Red and blue lights flared against the frosted windows. The sound of engines and doors slamming echoed through the clinic. Internal affairs, local police, federal agents, they had all come. Hale's face twisted with rage, veins bulging along his thick neck. You think one dog and a stray girl are worth burning your career for? Daniel wiped blood from his mouth. They're worth more than you ever were. Hale drew a pistol in a final act of desperation. But before he could aim, Shadow, mustering the last of his strength, launched himself from the table. He collided with Hale's arm, knocking the gun aside. Hale fell backward, crashing into a shelf. Officers stormed in. "Drop your weapon," they shouted. Hale raised his hands, but his eyes locked on Daniel, burning with hatred. "You ruined everything," Hale snarled. "No," Daniel said, voice steadier than ever. "You did." Officers swarmed the room, restraining Hale and his men. Shadow collapsed, panting hard. Lily crawled out from hiding and ran to Daniel, tears streaking her dusty face. "Is it over?" she whispered. Daniel knelt and placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Yes, Lily. It's over." And for the first time, she believed those words. 2 days later, Daniel stood with Lily at the entrance of the Evergreen Children's Care Center, a clean, warm facility with murals of forests and stars painted along the walls. The social worker, Mrs. Helen Parker, greeted them with a gentle smile. She was a woman in her mid-50s with short silver hair, soft eyes, and a calming presence, someone who had dedicated her life to protecting children like Lily. Lily clung to Daniel's sleeve, uncertain. Daniel knelt to meet her eyes. "You're finally somewhere safe," he said. "These people will take care of you. You'll have food, a warm bed, school, friends." Her lower lip quivered. "Will I see you again?" Daniel smiled softly. "You'll see me as much as you want." Shadow, now healing and wrapped in clean bandages, rested his head against Daniel's leg. His amber eyes still carried scars, but they also held peace. Lily knelt and stroked his fur. "Goodbye, Shadow," she whispered. "Be a good boy." Shadow licked her hand once, a promise. As the staff led Lily inside, she turned and waved, a fragile smile blooming on her face. Daniel raised a hand in return. He and Shadow walked back toward the road, the cold morning sun casting long shadows behind them. Daniel placed a hand on Shadow's head. "From now on," he murmured, "we're family." Shadow leaned into him, the bond sealed by battle, pain, and survival. And together, the Marine and the dog who refused to break stepped into a new beginning. Sometimes the smallest act of compassion becomes the greatest miracle of someone's life. And sometimes God sends help through the people we meet in the most unexpected moments. In this story, a Marine, a wounded dog, and a homeless child crossed paths by pure chance. But perhaps it wasn't chance at all. Perhaps it was a reminder that grace still exists in this world, that kindness still has the power to save, and that no soul is too broken for God to lift up again. As we walk through our own daily struggles, may we learn to open our eyes a little wider, because the miracle someone is praying for might be waiting right in front of us. And the miracle we need may come from a place we never imagined. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment to tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of faith, courage, and redemption. May God bless and protect you and your family wherever you are in the world. May He guide your steps, strengthen your spirit, and fill your days with peace and light.